We have some major updates here in the Jack Eichel situation. There appears to be progress leading us to a potential trade in the near future. We also want to take a look at some other signings, injuries, and waiver news from around the NHL. All that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a lot to cover here today. We'll get into the Eichel updates here momentarily, but before we do that, we do have several other smaller news items to quickly cover here today. I want to kick things off with some updates on some injuries and some signings. Injuries, I want to start with Quinton Byfield, Los Angeles Kings top prospect, the former number 2 overall selection behind Alexis Lafreniere. Had a weird collision into the boards last night. Had a leg injury. Looks like it could be a knee issue. Right now they're listing him as week to week, but some feel it could be a few weeks before he gets back into action. So that's unfortunate. He was having a pretty decent preseason, was still in the mix for a roster spot, and we'll see where things go for him. We also saw another update on an injury. It was a weird scenario last night involving linesman Ryan Gibbons. A weird, awkward collision with kind of out of the blue with a Coyotes player, which actually happened right after the national anthem. He was talking to somebody at the team bench, and then as he skated around, the player came around and they just had an awkward collision. He's been diagnosed with a concussion. He did have to be taken off on a stretcher, so it was a scary situation, but it looks as though, based on what people are saying, I know he has reached out and talked to some of his other colleague linesmen and officials around the league, and they're saying that even though it is, unfortunate, it is somewhat serious. Obviously concussions always are, but it looks like it's, not as bad as it could have been, and he's actually feeling decent considering what he actually went through. So we want to wish the best for him, and hopefully he can get back to being in the NHL here soon enough. Some other injury updates. We have an update on a few Montreal Canadiens players. They're going to be without Carey Price and Joel Edmondson to start the season. Carey Price, we knew, was already recovering from a knee procedure, and apparently he's been set back by some sort of illness. Really don't know the details as to what it is, but he will not be available to start the year and could miss the first probably week or two by the sounds of things. So obviously, like we mentioned before, made a lot of sense why the Habs had an opportunity to grab Samuel Montembeault off waivers. Obviously, he'll play with Jake Allen between the pipes here while Price recovers, and we'll see what the future holds for him being in Montreal, but certainly going to be a good placeholder. Hopefully, somebody who can hold the fort down, because he likely might have to play a game or two here, depending on how long Price is out. Now, Joel Edmondson's situation, a little different here. Obviously, we've been hearing day to day through training camp. Now they're saying he's going to be looking at 2 to 3 weeks. So that's going to be another big blow to start the season with another absence on their blue line. They're already without Shea Weber, the captain, who's going to miss the entire year. Obviously, Weber and Edmondson were 2 of the 4 big bodies back there who helped them be so successful on their playoff run. We know Mike Hoffman obviously was injured going into training camp, and he's likely going to be out too. So, not a good start for Montreal when it comes to health. They're obviously going to be missing a lot of bodies, and we'll see how much of an impact that has here on the team. Now, when it comes to some other signings and notes around the league that way, we had the Maple Leafs made 2 announcements. They had a couple players there on PTOs. One was Nikita Gusev. Gusev has been released, so he's not going to get a contract with the Toronto Maple Leafs, which is kind of unfortunate. I thought that might be a situation that might work out. He's an offensively gifted player. I thought maybe they might be able to have an opportunity to create some cap space. If he worked out, they could sign him cheaply and maybe try to move a more expensive contract, get more cap flexibility. That's not happening. Gusev is gone. They have signed Josh Hosang, though, but the caveat is that it's an AHL-only deal. So I guess there's 2 parts to this. For one, they can't call him up because he's only on an American Hockey League deal. But secondly, where they feel he's had an impressive training camp, they don't have to put him through waivers. So I guess maybe they were concerned putting him through waivers to get to the American Hockey League was going to be a problem, and they could lose him. So at least this way they can sign him to an AHL-only deal. They know he'll get his games, and if they want to be able to call him up later, they'll have to, at that point, sign him to an NHL contract. But at least it gets him to the Marlies situation, to start the year a little bit more risk-free that way. Some other signings too. The Coyotes did come to terms with former Leaf, former Hab, former many other teams, Senators. Alex Galchenyuk, of course, he ended up going to the Coyotes on a PTO, earns himself a contract, gets a one-year deal, $750. Of course, he played in Arizona before. Of course, he was involved in that trade from the Montreal Canadiens to Arizona, 1-for-1 for Max Domi. So obviously, he goes back to a familiar place. He was training in Arizona through the offseason. I believe he has an offseason home there. So we'll see how things go for him on his second stint in Arizona. The Dallas Stars also announced a signing today. They've announced that 2021 second-round pick, left shot defenseman from Russia, Artem Gruzhnishkov, has signed his 3-year entry-level contract. Obviously, that likely means that he will be playing hockey in North America. Obviously, he's not going to be able to play in the KHL if he's got an NHL contract. So I'm not sure exactly where he's going to end up. He could very well go to their AHL team, or he could also end up playing with a junior team as well. I'm not sure what junior team has his rights, but that's a possibility as well. We also got a bunch of other news on waivers today. We'll get to that in a second, but there's another quick note here. When it comes to what Robin Lehner was talking about and all his concerns, we have another player stepping forward, although I guess we can pretty well call him a former player. I don't believe he's active any longer, but Tom Sestito is a former guy who was mostly used in an enforcing type of role, has stepped up and has been scheduling some meetings here with the NHL as well to address similar concerns to what we heard Robin Lehner talk about on Twitter and to kind of air his grievances against the league and what he wants to change for. We talked about Lehner yesterday and the fact that he's had meetings with the PA, with the league. He feels like they're listening. He's happy with the reception and the conversations so far, and now he's going to have another ally here, and another, even though Sestito is a former player, but he's a pretty recent former player. He hasn't been out of the game very long. So to have somebody else step forward and address concerns as well goes to show that, you know what, Robin Lehner obviously has some legitimate concerns, and it's not just a one thing that's happened here that he's talking about. Obviously, other players are talking about it as well. And according to Elliot Friedman, there's a lot of players around the league extremely happy and proud of Lehner speaking up when it comes to the Eichel situation, even though not everybody agreed with him on all the other stuff when it comes to the painkillers and the sleeping drugs and all those other things he went kind of on a tirade about. That seems to be a mixed reaction to, obviously, it's going to probably depend on what they've seen during their time in the league as well, but many were quite happy to see him speak up about the Eichel situation, as a lot of NHL players are reportedly not happy with how that's being handled as well. Now, on the NHL waiver wire today, we had no claims. So everybody that was on waivers yesterday has cleared. They can be assigned to their American Hockey League affiliates and move forward. Today's waivers, I'll give you a graphic here on the screen again because there is a lot. I'm only going to go through some of the names that are a little bit more common or more familiar. For example, we have Alex Volkov with the Anaheim Ducks on waivers. The Buffalo Sabres have put Aaron Dell. Of course, they signed he and Craig Anderson to be what many thought to be the NHL tandem, but Dustin Tokarski, who's been around the NHL, AHL for quite some time now, has beat out Aaron Dell for one of those spots. Dell has not had a great preseason, so he's on waivers. The Avalanche have a number of players that are familiar, including Cole Sherwood, Stefan Matteau, and Dylan Sakura. The Islanders have several players as well, including Andy Andreoff, Austin Zarnik, Otto Koivula, and Dmitry Timashov, as well as I think a few others there. Then we have the Leafs got Joey Anderson, as well as Dahlstrom. The Kraken have Cole Lim and Max McCormick, and the Vancouver Canucks have placed Jonah Gacevich on waivers as well, all for the purposes of being demoted to their American Hockey League affiliates. So that is your waivers news here for today. Before we jump into the Eichel news, though, I do have to pause for our channel sponsor, Manscaped. Top Shelf Hockey is proud to be sponsored by Manscaped. And guess what? Hockey fans are buzzing because hockey is back. Want to know what else is buzzing? The Lawnmower 4.0 from our friends at Manscaped, who are the global leaders in male grooming, trusted by over 2 million men worldwide. I highly recommend the Performance Package 4.0, which includes their new state-of-the-art Lawnmower 4.0, as well as some other great features. The lawnmower itself has a 7,000 RPM motor, a new multifunction switch that can engage as a travel lock, gives you the ability to turn on an LED spotlight as well for a more precise shave. Also, as I've mentioned on numerous occasions before, Manscaped is about much more than just a trimmer. They have everything, all aspects prospects covered and male grooming, including some great formulations like their brand new ultra premium body wash to keep you smelling great all day long. It's certainly a big hit here. I absolutely love it. They also have other exfoliators and gels to keep all aspects of your grooming needs covered. I highly recommend you check out manscaped.com. Use promo code TSH for 20% off and free shipping. That's 20% off and free shipping at manscaped.com using promo code TSH. So thanks very much for watching that promotional content. I do greatly appreciate it. Now on to the big news of the day. We had a pretty substantial piece of information put out on Twitter here by Darren Dreger earlier today, and I'll show you the tweet here, which essentially he says that it looks as though the situation with the Eichel camp is shifting. So essentially, teams appear to be getting better access to medical records. Now, we also heard Elliotte Friedman talk about this a little bit more today and what he's learned on the Jeff Merrick show on Sportsnet. And between he and Dreger, and even Dave Pagnona has put out information on this today as well. So I'll kind of, take all the information from all three of these NHL insiders and kind of summarize everything that's being discussed. But essentially, according to Friedman, there's a number of things here that have kind of moved things along. And some feel that Robin Lehner's comments might have played a role here. Obviously, it might have put a little bit more pressure to get something done, because clearly the Sabres have felt like they've had they've had to leverage in the negotiations here because they didn't feel like they had any pressure to trade him. For one, they know they're not going to be a great team this year, so whether or not he's on the team or they have the assets to return from a trade or anything like that, it's not going to have a huge difference into their performance this year. They know that. They want to get the best value that they can, and they feel like they have a top player that rarely becomes available in the trade market, and they've been sitting on this for some time, and they want to get the right deal. I get that. But that's where they've kind of held their ground for the longest time. But it's at a point now for a couple of things, like I said, the Lehner stuff, but also Eichel's health. I mean, he can't just sit for long periods of time with this issue. Like, at some point, he needs to get something done. And his quality of life, whether he's playing hockey or not, is certainly not the same as it could be if he were completely healthy. It does appear there's some pressure put on the team to get something done based on that, because they need to come to a decision on what his surgery is going to be to get the situation rectified so he can become healthy and become hopefully pain-free and move forward. That's the whole additional goal here. But essentially, what we're kind of learning here between all these insiders, it looks as though his new agent, Pat Brisson, has been taking Eichel to a lot of different medical appointments. We know they've been talking to different specialist about the surgery that he would prefer to have to get some more information to try to, I guess, build more of a case of doctors that would be on their side to have this surgery done. Friedman also mentioned that they've been also having done a lot of other tests like MRIs to be able to take that and be able to show as well. So even though the Sabres may not have released a whole lot, I mean, I know, like Friedman said just a few days ago, that he was being told that the medical records at that point from the Sabres side of things were still not being shared, and he couldn't confirm that they were actually shared with anybody in trade negotiations or trade talks. But now we're hearing that some of this information appears to be more accessible, and it might actually be through the agent. Now, of course, they have to have Sabres permission to do a lot of this stuff, so we know that Pat Brisson was brought in to kind of massage this situation and obviously try to find a solution, work with the Sabres team as well as the other teams trying to maybe make a deal here that are interested. We know there's plenty of teams that are. Friedman reiterated again today that he knows that there are teams out there that appear to be interested in making a trade, even with letting Eichel have the surgery that he wants to have, the disc replacement surgery. So it's not a foregone conclusion here that it can't happen. And some are wondering if we might actually get an acceleration here in trade talks, and I know there's a lot of optimistic people, and I guess we'll have to wait and see. I don't want to get my hopes up. I don't want to get anybody else's hopes up that this situation might actually come to a head and have a solution in place in the very near future. We're talking days. Of course, like I said, that's just a few people's opinions. No guarantee by any means that that actually takes place. But at the end of the day here, Dave Pagnona has still gone on to mention a variety of teams in his article today, talking about teams like the Rangers, the Blue Jackets. He mentions the LA Kings here yet again as well, the Anaheim Ducks. We've heard other teams like recently from Friedman with the Calgary Flames. Some believe Montreal's in the mix. We have some people who still think Minnesota's in the mix. Others reporting the Boston Bruins. There's a lot of teams that are interested, and I wouldn't completely rule out a stealth team that we haven't even talked about here kind of come out of nowhere and present an offer, and you just never know. There's only a limited amount of teams with cap space. It's been rumored all along that Sabres really want a futures-based package going in return for Eichel, and there's only so many teams that can do that. We're talking about teams that finished near the bottom of the standings last year, that have more cap space, that are rebuilding, and have lots of good future assets, but not necessarily, and would have to move a lot of money around to make it work. Out of all the teams that Pagnotta mentioned, though, like I mentioned, I'm not really convinced the LA Kings are in the mix. We've seen other reports suggest that they've been out of it for a while. With all the moves they've made this offseason, I would be shocked. I mean, at the same time, they do have a really deep prospect pool of interesting players there that would probably intrigue the Sabres. I think they could pull it off, but they would definitely have to have money going out for sure, and I just don't know that they're going to want to do that with everything that they've locked up here recently, so I'd be shocked if it were the Kings. But all the other teams would not be shocked at all if they indeed made it happen. Like I said, some of these teams have been linked to him forever, and like I said, we can't rule out other teams that would kind of sneak in here at the 11th hour once they hear talks are picking up again and make a trade. And the other thing that a lot of these insiders seem to agree on too is that a lot of the pieces going to the Sabres might have to have conditions. And if they're going to have conditions, that says that they're probably going to be more pick loaded and not a ton of actual players, because you can't really put a condition on a player, but you can on a draft pick. You could say if he has a surgery and he plays, say, 40 games this year, you get a first round pick. You could say if he plays in 75% of the games next year, and if he misses time, as long as it's not related to the surgery, you get another first round pick, or things like that. Or you could say we get a second and a third, or whatever. Like, you could, whatever you want for picks. It doesn't matter. You can just put conditions that he has to play so many games over like this year or next year or something like that, that he shows that the surgery is successful, that he's healthy and whatever. I mean, obviously, if he were to have disc replacement surgery now, see, that's the other thing too, is a team could acquire him and he could go immediately to long-term injury reserve. They would not necessarily have to become cap compliant immediately. They could work their way around trading out other money if they need to before he needs to get activated. He may not be able to play until the deadline. Like, for example, it would really depend on how quickly the surgery were to take place. But, looking at the recovery time frame from the disc replacement surgery, if that ends up happening, we're talking a lot shorter period of time. If everything goes well and as planned, maybe he could be playing hockey by the deadline and could actually get games in this year. So obviously, like I said, a lot of the things that Robin Lehner said were true. You really don't want to see a young man like this, who's such an important, big part of the NHL, have a lost season because the Sabres cannot or will not get a deal done. I understand their position. I know he's a huge asset to them, and this is a messy divorce, and I totally understand why they're playing ball the way they are. But at the same time, his health is, certainly a big issue here. And if he's not getting any better, it's not fair that he gets to deal with all this pain and not get some kind of a solution to the surgery that he needs and get it done. So we'll see if this new news that came out here today will accelerate a trade. All kinds of teams in the mix here. I'd love to know what your thoughts are on where he could possibly end up. But the fact that trade talks are indeed picking up, teams are getting more access to medical records. Teams are, according to Friedman, at least some of them are willing to make a trade contingent on him having this disc replacement surgery. We might get a deal here done sooner than any of us ever thought. I know it wasn't that long ago. I was convinced that this could be a lost season. This could be a situation where he misses the whole year. The trade doesn't get done until later. He ends up coming to terms with Buffalo, has surgery, gets healthy, and goes from there. But Friedman even did mention today as well that, you never know. Maybe they work out a deal in advance, but they don't execute the deal. And then maybe they agreed to the surgery, and then he comes back and has to play a few games with Buffalo to show that he's healthy before he gets moved. I don't think Eichel would go for that myself. I can understand to a degree why it might be something that they discuss, but I don't think there's any situation that he puts that jersey on and plays another game for the Sabres, considering where everything is at here. We did see on I believe it was Instagram, Jack Eichel liked Robin Lehner's post when he was talking about his situation, so clearly he was happy that his former teammate spoke up here and tried to cause a stir to get something done. We'll see if the Lehner comments had any impact or not. I would say probably maybe a little bit, but I think his agents have already been working on things, and I think Pat Brisson is probably going to be as much or much more the bigger of the part of the solution here than the Leonard comments, but it all kind of worked together, and we'll see. So let me know where you think Eichel ends up. These are some big developments in my opinion. We might get a trade very soon to talk about. So let me know your thoughts. We'll discuss further. If you're new to this channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news, rumors, and analysis on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.